Good morning. This is the Morning News on WSBA, hour number 3. It's the Thursday morning edition. I'm Gary Sutton.
And I'm Chris Tyler.
WSBA News Time is 8:10. We've been talking today about deception. We talked with Andy McCarthy a little bit earlier about deception and fraud and all those kind of things. Dr. Walter E. Williams, who is an economist, an author, a columnist, a professor, and also a sitting host for Rush Limbaugh every now and then, wrote a great article yesterday called Do Americans Prefer Deception? And he joins us here on the Morning News. Dr. Williams, always an honor, sir.
Hey, good morning.
I was reading your article on Do Americans Prefer Deception, and I was doing my benefits program last night, and then I was looking at my pay stub last evening, and it really kind of fed into what you talked about yesterday. Tell us a little bit about your article, Do Americans Prefer Deception?
Well, I was pointing out, I started the column pointing out, other things that I've said about Social Security and
right.
Medicare. And matter of fact, a lot of times I get in some ugly letters when I talk about Social Security. But I was pointing out that the Social Security Administration and Congress and everybody believes that in terms of Social Security taxes, you pay half of it
right.
as an employee, and the employer pays the other half. And so for a total of 12.4%.
Right.
But I pointed out that this is a deception. This is a trick. It's a fiction. And it turns out that the employee is paying all of the Social Security. Now, let me give you an example of this. Run this through. Okay, suppose you hire me for $6 an hour. We agree to $6 an hour.
Okay.
Okay. Out of that $6 an hour, you have to send in to the government 25 cents for my share of Social Security.
All right.
Then you also have to send in your share as the employer of 25 cents. Okay. Now, if you have to ask the question now, how much does it cost you to hire me per hour? Well, it turns out it costs you $6.25 an hour to hire me. So if you're going to hire me and stay in business, what's the minimum I have to produce per hour for you? Is it $6 or $6.25?
$6.25.
Yes, $6.25.
Right.
And so who is paying all of the Social Security? I am.
Right.
And so, but now when the Social Security was first enacted, or when they were discussing Social Security in the mid 1930s, President Roosevelt's brain trust, somebody in President Roosevelt's brain trust said, "Look, this just will not work. A 2% tax on employees." And so somebody said, let's create the fiction that the employee pays one half and the employer pays one half. And that fiction has survived for 80 some years.
Okay, so what about something like Medicare then? You talk about that in your article as well.
Well, yes, they have I think it's 1.45.
Right.
That's the Medicare tax that you have to pay as the employee,
okay, and
the employer, they say the employer pays the other 1.45 up to some level.
Right.
Now it turns out again, you also pay all of the Medicare, and then on top of that, if you have health insurance or any other kind of benefit, you pay for it. Now the employee, he would prefer to have, let's say, some of his benefits paid by, quote unquote, paid by the employer, because it comes out before taxes. That you get a better deal.
Absolutely.
From the employer taking out your let's say your health insurance, because you don't have to pay taxes on it. You get the health insurance without having to pay taxes. But if the employer did not take out your money to pay for health insurance, and you pay for it yourself after taxes, it would be far more costly to you.
There's another part you talk about in there about Social Security and Medicare deception. The taxes are officially called FICA, which stands for Federal Insurance Contributions Act. Talk a little bit about that as well.
Well, okay, FICA, it stands for Federal Insurance Contributions Act.
Right.
Okay. Now, that's what established Social Security. Now, first of all, it's not insurance. It's absolutely not insurance. And then, because in insurance, like if you have life insurance or something like that, well, and if you die, well, your heirs get the rest of it. And so, but with Social Security, your heirs get $250 to bury you. From the Social Security Administration. And then they say, okay, so it's federal insurance. That's not true. Then Contributions Act. That is, you are making a contribution. Now, from what I understand, I went to the dictionary and got synonyms for contribution, and the synonyms are alms, charity, beneficence, donation, philanthropy. And I asked the reader which one of those words comes close to describing Social Security. None of them. Social Security is a tax. As a matter of fact, the Supreme Court in 2 cases said it is a tax just like any other tax. And it's not being, and the money that's being taken out of your pay for Social Security is not put in a special account as they said when the program first started. It's just a regular tax going in with the other taxes.
The so-called lockbox we heard so much about the 1 year.
Right.
So we go back to Bastiat, legal plunder once again, right?
That is right. And then there's more deceit and dishonesty. I point out in the column, in 1950, when I was 14 years old, I applied for a job, and one of the requirements was that you had to get a work permit.
Right.
You had to get a Social Security number. And on my Social Security card that I still have, that I got in 1950, it says in bold letters, quote, for Social Security purposes, not for identification. Now, that was put on the cards. They had to do that because Americans back then feared having an identity number. They were scared to death of having an identity number. Now, all those Americans back then, they're dead now. So now the Social Security number indeed becomes an identity number. You can't do anything without putting down a Social Security number.
Or if you call in a bill somewhere, what's the last 4 digits of your Social Security number? I mean, it's absolutely just common practice. We're going to come back and talk a little bit with you, Doctor, about the good, the bad, and the ugly on Obamacare. And it does feed into this because this week up on the Hill, we've had some guys up there on the on this whole website deal saying, is the whole system safe? No, were the 4 answers they got the other day. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. So we move from Social Security now to, hey, Obamacare. Let's really put all of our information out there so everybody has a little slice of the pie. Dr. Walter E. Williams with us here on the Morning News. This great article, by the way, I wanted you to tell us the last line in the article because I thought it was absolutely pure with the reference to H.L. Mencken.
I think why don't you read it to me?
It says,
I wonder, the article in front of me.
I wonder whether political satirist H.L. Mencken was right when he said, quote, nobody ever went broke underestimating the intelligence of the American public, unquote.
Well, that seems to be the case. That is, Americans fall for all kinds of tricks. And this is one of the reasons why Obama won the election is because he was promising to take care of our health problems.
I want to tell you something, though. I got into an argument with a guy in Gettysburg, of all places, the other night. It didn't turn into a battle, but it was a nice argument. We had a back and forth and both respected each other. But I said to him, who makes better decisions about my life, me or the government? And this guy basically said the government does because we're all pretty stupid and lazy and we don't want to go about doing our job. So how would you have answered that in that conversation? I believe that we, if we do our due diligence, and he basically said, well, I'm lazy when it comes to voting. I don't check out all my candidates. And so I said, well, then that's on you.
Yeah, a number of years ago, here's the way I would have handled. A number of years ago, this is like in the 80s, and Pat Schroeder, she and I were on the platform. We were debating about educational vouchers,
right?
And she was for public schools, and I was for for free choice in schools. And so she was saying how much she cares about the children, and she said, and Dr. Williams, I care about your child. And I asked her, well, what's my child's name?
Very well done. Yeah, but we're getting into this whole thing right now. So now we move over to Obamacare, and they care about all of us. They want us to have lower insurance rates, and they want us to have our own policy. They want us to be able to keep our own doctor. they said all of us who had insurance before, we're not going to have to worry about anything. It's all okay.
Yeah, well, I think that the idea, and matter of fact, it was a column I wrote, I think last week, is called "Does Washington Know Best?" And I was asking the question, and just ask let your listeners think about this. For example, now the average well-stocked supermarket in the United States carries 60 to 65,000 different items. Now, ask your listeners, how many of them would like Congress to be in charge of the supermarkets? to make decisions all about these 60 to 65,000 items in the supermarket. How do you think they would make out? And how do you think you would make out? Now, if you doubt whether Congress could take care of all the supermarkets in our country, well, what would make you ever think that they could take care of our health system? Because our health system is far more, infinitely more complex than the supermarket system in our country.
And we're finding out about how many unintended or maybe even intended circumstances are happening because of that. But we made that comparison the other day. I said, if you went into your store, for example, and you said, I want to buy a jar of peanut butter, and you went up to the counter and they say, oh, no, you can't just buy a jar of peanut butter. You also have to buy sardines and crackers. I said, I don't want sardines and crackers. I just want peanut butter, where you're going to have to pay for those three things. Mm-hmm. Isn't that kind of where we're stuck right now in this whole Obamacare thing?
That's right. They're telling a healthy 22-year-old male that he has to now buy a health insurance, a medical insurance policy that includes prenatal care, or that includes
pediatric services, for example.
Pediatric services or OBGYN. And so, this is incredible. It's just like your example you gave, that you go buy peanut butter and they say you got to buy sardines and crackers as well. And see, I think, and then also something else about our supermarkets, and just we can just marvel at them. That is, we don't tell our supermarket guy when we're going to shop. We don't tell him how much we're going to shop, what we're going to buy when we shop. We don't tell him how many we're going to buy when we shop, but damn it, he better have it or we're going to fire him.
Doctor, we had a guest on last hour who was pretty fired up about the Affordable Care Act, and he said if the president was a private citizen, he would have been prosecuted because of all the lies that have surrounded Obamacare. Your feelings on that?
I think he's absolutely right, and I think that another thing that Americans are letting him get away with is he's just going to change the law.
Yeah.
That is, the executive branch of government is in charge of enforcing laws. Congress is in charge of legislation. And so the president is taking over. And like somebody said, I think everybody would be upset if Romney had won and said, well, I think that the capital gains tax is too high, so I'm going to lower it to 10%.
So
you'd have the media and everybody outraged because they say, well, you don't have that power. That's not a constitutional power that you have.
And yet we had our congressman on Monday, and we said, why aren't you people bringing this up to the president? Why aren't you calling him on this, for heaven's sakes? He said, well, there's not really the stomach for it right now. So we go back to what we said here before. A, we may have a big club up there that seems to be okay with deception, and B, we have Americans who aren't pushing their people to get out there and tell the president, hey, you can't do this. So maybe Americans do prefer deception at the end of the day in this particular case, too. About 40 seconds left. Final thoughts.
Well, I think that, as I point out in this column, economists, we have not done our job very well. And Friedrich Hayek, Nobel laureate, said, the curious task of economics is to illustrate to men how little they know about what they imagine they can design.
Wow. Dr. Williams, always great having you aboard, sir. Thank you so much, and have a great Thanksgiving.
And have a good day, you guys.
Thank you. Take care. Dr. Walter E. Williams with us here on the Morning News. He's also the sit-in host for Rush Limbaugh from time to time.